One last time, let's go back to the mud, lest we become a body found floating by the docks. Hey, what's up, bookworms and named men? We are back one last time, guys, to talk about the final book in Joe Abercrombie's The First Law Trilogy. This, of course, is The Last Argument of Kings, released in 2008, guys. This was a book that kind of scarred me a little bit when it came out, and we'll get into it, mostly because it was unlike anything I had ever read in the genre before. So, yes, again, I have both editions of this. Will not get rid of either one because I love both versions so much, and this is a series that is very, very dear for me. Guys, I would say that this will be a spoiler-free review for this book. As for books 1 and 2, that is The Blade itself and Before They're Hanged, some things might come up because I got to kind of talk about where our characters are right now. So if you don't want to know who lives, who dies, all those things through the first two books, I might turn away now. Bookmark this, come back after you've read at least the first two books. But you are free of spoilers if you've yet to read the final volume of the First Law Trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. Now, you can catch my spoiler talk on this. It's really old. It's when I first started the channel, but I did do a complete spoiler breakdown of the plot, almost beat by beat. You can find that on the channel, as well as everything First Law related. I have done spoilers. This is really kind of just giving this the treatment that, I would give a standard book review on the channel because it was just a favorite series of mine I wanted to revisit. So that's where we are, guys. So did Joe stick the landing with this final book in the trilogy? Well, we're going to talk about it, guys. We're going to begin, like usual, by talking about what is this book about. Now, the end is coming. Logan Ninefingers might have only one more fight in him, but it's going to be a big one. Battle rages across the north, and there's only one man who can stop him. His oldest friend and his oldest enemy. It's past time for the Bloody Nine to come home. With too many masters and too little time, Superior Galacta is fighting a different kind of war. A secret struggle in which no one is safe and no one can be trusted. His days with the sword are far behind him, and it's a good thing that blackmail, threats, and torture still work well enough. Meanwhile, Jazaldan Luther has decided that winning glory is far too painful, and he has turned his back on soldiering for a simple life with the woman that he loves. But love can be painful too, and glory has a nasty habit of creeping up on a man when he least expects it. While the King of the Union lies on his deathbed, the peasants revolt, and the nobles scramble to steal his crown. No one believes that the shadow of war is falling across the very heart of the Union. But the First of the Magi has a plan to save the world, as he always does. But there are risks. There is no risk more terrible, after all, than to break the First Law. Guys, that takes us to 2008, the conclusion of the First Law Trilogy. Now, when you begin with what makes this book good or bad, guys, it's going to be the twists. The twists are the best part of this book. And I think short of A Song of Ice and Fire, guys, no fantasy book has ever shocked me the way that this book does. I think it's so rapid fire. And it isn't just like the ending or something. About a third of the way into this book, there is a twist. It is so huge, it turns the entire series on its head. And it's not forced, guys. It's one of those things where you're like, I should have seen that coming, and you usually don't. I mean, there are some people, there's a lot of readers out there more smart than me. They'll figure it out. But with me, it was like, I didn't see it coming at all, and it completely changes everything, and I loved it. It was just non-stop from there. So I think the pacing is perfect in this. It isn't just like non-stop action or anything. I think the builds are really, really well done, and right when you need Joe to pop it off, he does, and he gets really, really good. And guys, the last third of this book is just amazing. You will not be able to stop. So it's one of those things I say, if you got about 200 pages left in this book, don't start it right before bedtime because you're going to finish it that night. It's really, really good. But what do I always say is the best thing about the series? The characters. In this, you get to see some of those character arcs come full circle here. And some is very much in a beautiful way, some in a not so good way. But again, you take the good with the bad in a series like this. I think some characters are not going to quite get the ending that you want. And this is one of those, if you think that this is, if you've been reading this thinking there's going to be a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention kind of moments. I think that's very, very true with this story because you think of each of these characters, and some might have a happier ending than others. But I don't know if there's any of these you would say, oh yeah, that's a real storybook Disney kind of ending, because I really don't think that's really here. Logan's resolution is done in a way that you're like, I don't see how it could have went any other way, honestly. You try to think about the best scenario for Logan, And it's hard for you to think of somehow it doesn't end the way that it does. But it's not anything I think that you'll really see coming. That's what makes it really, really great. Galacta, I think that Galacta has about, if there is such a thing as a happy ending in this world, he might be the closest thing to it, but even that is debatable. So I'm not even going to tell you how that goes. But Wes, I think Wes continues his path of redemption in this book, and I think he really does get to a point where, you as the reader would follow him into battle. I really think that he does kind of earn your trust and respect back after, the things that he does at the end of the first book that makes him seem almost non-redeemable. I think Joe does a really great job of making him much more interesting and maybe make you forgive him a little bit for some of his mistakes in that first book. But I think a great arc for that guy. Pharaoh has somewhat of an ambiguous conclusion, I'd say, but I think it's incredibly satisfying getting there. She has some of the biggest moments in this book. In fact, if I gotta say that this book is anyone's, it might be Pharaoh's as far as character development goes, because she really does come all the way to where you thought she could in that first book, and she does in this one, and it's really, really good. Again, it might not be the ending that you're kind of looking for that character, and it might leave you with some questions, but I think her journey in this book is very, very good. Dogman, I think, is really the painful one in this book, because he's really struggling with all the losses along the way in this book, in this series during this war, because he's of all the characters in this series, I think he's suffered the most losses that make it really, really tough for him to figure out, why am I here? Why am I doing this? Why am I continuing on? That kind of thing. So he has a very, very bleak kind of view in this book. But when you're talking about, all these multiple battles and stuff, it's kind of expected you're going to have a lot of the regret and the sorrow that a character like Dogman does, and you'll see why in this book. But I gotta say, Jazal continues to be the character that evolves the most in this entire series. His journey in this book, I still think what happened to him in book 2, where it really transitioned him into characters you might have had some empathy for, maybe, because in the first book you really didn't. With this one, you're really, really going to feel bad for what this guy has to go through. But at the same time, you're like, but should I be feeling bad for him? Turnabout seems like fair play, maybe. But the events that happened with him in this book, I could never in a million years predicted coming. And it's a tragic tale for this guy. It really is. And just seeing how Joe will take this character to where he started in The Blade itself and where he ends up in this third book is absolutely spectacular, the way that he does it. And I think you'll be very, very satisfied with a lot of it. But the ending of this thing's all, we'll talk about in a minute. It's going to kind of depend on you. Now, Baez, I think Baez has some things in here that will have your jaw on the floor. Things that I still to this day do not know how Joe pulled off, but he does pull it off so incredibly well. And I would never, ever spoil this for people, because really I think this whole series, how you feel about it when you're done, hinges on how you feel about the decisions that he makes with Baez in this book. It is not going to be what you expect, but it is one of the things that makes Baez one of the most intriguing characters in all of modern fantasy, or fantasy as a whole, really. I think there's just so many layers to this guy that, I say today, all these years later, almost going on 15 years now since I finished this series, that I still think about and still try to question about the way that Joe does with this character in this series. But it's just incredible character journeys with all these big characters. I think of some of the mysteries that he kind of lays out in this book. There's a lot of things from book 1 and 2 that really, you could have had like a list after book 1 and 2 of a lot of unanswered questions. You get a lot of those answers here. You do. You get to find out about the Eaters. You get to find out about Valiant and Bulk, Logan and Bethid, who the Tanner is. That was a big one that I had. What's the truth of the daughter of the Maker? What is the seed? All of those questions will be answered here. Now, I'm not saying you're going to get everything answered. I'm saying you're going to get most of those big questions answered. All those ones I just talked about, you're going to get some answers to. And most, I think, will be satisfying. There's some you might struggle with a little bit. But again, I think this is just one of those series, your mileage is just going to vary depending on what you're looking for. But a lot of those questions, you will get satisfying conclusions to. And I got to say, guys, the ending of this is an all-timer. It is one that fans of this series still argue and debate about today. It really is divisive, but not in like that divisive kind of way of like, it's not like a Brent Weeks ending or something where you're like, what were you thinking doing that? It's just decisions that he made that never seem, out of nowhere. It really doesn't. it's one of those things you can look back on after you finish reading, but like, it was there the whole time, and you never really thought it was coming. So it is a very, very earned ending, but there are going to be some feelings. There are going to be some people who absolutely hate it, and there's going to be some people who absolutely love it. I'm not going to lie, I didn't like it the first time I read it, but I'll get to that in my final thoughts. There are some things here that might shock you because it does not follow typical traditional storytelling when it comes to a resolution. And I'll kind of leave it at that. But it is very much an ending that is an all-timer, I think. And it is one that still I find incredibly genius. But I did not when I first finished it in 2008. And I'll get into that a little bit more later. Go watch that spoiler review, like I said, if you want to know the whole ideas of my evolution on that ending, as it were. There are no perfect books, though, right, guys? So what are some bad things about here? I mean, I got to talk about the ending is very divisive. I mean, there are some people who have never continued with the rest of the First Law universe because of the way that this book ends. Even I was slow to read the standalones after it because of these reasons. So it's going to be something I think I want to prepare you for, in that, you might struggle with it. It might be hard for you to grasp what he does here in this ending. But again, I would say it's not an M. Night Shyamalan ending or something. It's nothing like that. It's a tough pill for some people to swallow. So you get a lot of those answers in this book. I think a problem that some people have is you don't get all the answers. There are some things, guys, this is a 9-book series as of the moment. So if you don't get everything here, maybe you get them later. But I know a lot of people expected to get all of those answers here. And look, you get a ton of those answers, like I just mentioned before. You get some new questions raised, though. You do. There are some things he leaves open-ended, some for your, for you to kind of figure out on your own, and some that maybe he just hasn't chosen to reveal yet. So I'll leave it at that. So if you're looking for a happy ending, like I said, guys, this is definitely one of those series where it's like, have you been paying attention to what this world is like? Did you really think this was going to end, with a nice rainbow and puppy dogs and a nice bow on top? It's something like that. But I don't think it's anything that's going to depress you per se. But we'll see. I would love to hear how you felt about that ending down below. But let's talk about, guys, why you should read it. Now, I think that if you've made it this far, why turn back now? This is one of the best conclusions to a trilogy I've read. But people always ask, okay, well, what is the First Law series about? And it's hard for you to tell them. What do you always say? Oh, well, the characters are just so great. And people like my guy Alan over at Library of Alexandria, he hates that. He hates it whenever somebody asks him, or he asks somebody, what is First Law about? And they just tell him, well, it's just an amazing character work. He's like, yes, but what is it about? Well, Alan, I got a little touche for you. I did the same thing with you with Malazan. You couldn't tell me. You were just like, you just got to read it, So it's kind of the same thing in that regard. If you really explain what this series is about, it's going to either ruin some stuff or it's going to drive some people away. So when you get to this point, you kind of see what it's about, and you see that it is just very much a character journey, and why it's hard to explain this series to anyone outside of ruining the plot for them. So I think it really, the conclusion of it, you get to see why people always say that, because of this conclusion. And again, this is the conclusion of some of the best character work I've ever seen. Not only in fantasy, guys, but in all of fiction. This is really, really amazing stuff, what Joe was able to pull off in a debut series. Just incredible characters that have always just embedded in my memory. I will never, ever be able to move away from these characters. I've always thought about it. I mean, I didn't read it again. I read it in 2008 when I finished it, guys. I didn't reread it again until 2019, I think, right before the Age of Madness trilogy started. I wanted to reread it before that. So for over a decade, these characters stuck in my memory, in my head, and it was always something I thought I would love to see this adapted to television and things like that because of these incredible, incredible characters. So I think for anything, guys, if you are a character-first person like me, I think this will be a series that you will adore, and I think that this is the epic, epic conclusion to those amazing character arcs that he began with the Blade itself. But for some final thoughts, guys, I gotta say, the first time I read this book, I won't lie, I got to the end, I was kind of pissed. I was kind of pissed because A Song of Ice and Fire was the only thing I had read Grimdark before this. And even that is kind of debatable. Some people, if it's Grimdark, I still very much find A Song of Ice and Fire Grimdark, the original Grimdark. With this, I feel like I know there's going to be some people who are like, no, that's not what I mean. I just mean for me, the original Grimdark was A Song of Ice and Fire. With this, I think that since A Song of Ice and Fire didn't have an ending, I hadn't had to grasp yet what it was like to reach the ending of a Grimdark series, realizing that, maybe the good guys don't always win. Are there good guys? Things like that. Questions that I wasn't ready to accept yet when I read this for the first time. So getting an ending that didn't exactly go the way that I thought it would go was something that was hard for me to stomach. And yeah, I was pissed when I finished the last book. I remember, this is funny because it was right when I had first gotten a Facebook page. That's how long ago it was. I got a Facebook page. I remember ranting in this long post about this series that no one besides me had read, about I'm tired of reading these trilogies that have these endings that are just terrible. I did. I thought it was terrible at the time. And then like a year went by and I was like, why am I still thinking about it? And I started to realize, actually, you know what? I think that ending is quite genius, what he did. It just took me some while to come to terms with it. So I think you're going to have a visceral reaction to the ending of this series like everyone else did. But for me, I think just the fact that I couldn't stop thinking about it means it was something that was done rather well. Now, look, I was one of those people who didn't want to read the standalones when they came out, because it wasn't about these same characters. And I do plan to do a video, guys, about why I think that you should read the standalone books of First Law before moving on to the Age of Madness, should you choose to do that. Because it is very, very important to several of the characters that will show up in the Age of Madness trilogy. But I don't think you have to, and I'm going to explain why. But yeah, with this, it's just, I was really, really angry about the way this ends. So I want to prepare you guys for that. It really is going to be something that might be tough for you to really stomach. But again, it's something that'll never ever leave your head, and for good reason, because some of the choices, some of the risks that Joe Abercrombie took here, like this is something I feel like is done all the time in fantasy now, but in 2008, this was like, wow, I can't believe your editor let you get away with this. It really does feel like that. So for me, it's something that feels like it's been emulated or tried to be copied numerous times. Even Joe, I think, has tried to do it himself, and it's never quite landed for me exactly how this did. So that's why I think this series will always be special to me, and it's why Last Argument of Kings is my favorite book in the First Law trilogy, my favorite book that Joe Abercrombie has ever written, because you have so many satisfying character arcs, and again, just an all-timer of an ending that just took fucking balls to write. It really, really did. I mean, you think about where fantasy was at that time, and it's just like, I don't know how he got away with this, because I feel like most publishers have been like, yeah, it's fine, but the ending's a little too dark. I don't know if maybe we can do that. So it's kind of amazing. I feel like he is kind of a trailblazer in that regard, because it seems like everyone's trying to do endings like this now, and they don't always stick the landing like Joe stuck the landing. So guys, that was Last Argument of Kings, and I want to thank you guys for letting me revisit this trilogy that I love so much, even if it was, spoiler free. Like I said, I have those spoiler talks on the channel. I felt like if I did them again, I would just repeat a lot of the same things. So I don't really want to do that, because the video quality and the sound quality has gotten better from back then. But my opinion hasn't changed. I still feel the same as I do in those spoiler talk videos. So I hope that you guys will check them out. I hope you'll check out this series if you haven't read it yet. I think you'll have a blast. So guys, that was the First Law trilogy. What did you think? Why don't you drop down below and let me know, did this ending bother you at all? I don't think there's a wrong answer there, but I would love to talk to you guys about it. So if you haven't read the book yet, guys, I say beware of the comments below, because they may discuss the ending. So take care, guys, and I'll talk to you in the comments.